I've got to admit, the first time I watched a friend's home theater install a cheap in-wall speaker, I was skeptical. The thing looked sleek, the price was tempting, but after a week of watching movies the bass was thin, the highs sounded harsh, and the whole system just felt off. That's the classic buyer's regret story. You spend a little, you end up spending a lot more fixing it later. So when I started looking into a proper, high-end solution for an in-wall setup, the question was simple: does the KEF Ci3160RLM THX actually deliver enough to justify its premium price, or am I just swapping one disappointment for another? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The first thing I did was read up on the kind of rooms people typically install these in, usually a dedicated media wall or a living room where you want the speakers hidden but still want full range performance. The biggest hesitation I keep hearing from folks is the fear of committing to an in-wall system that's hard to adjust later. You can't just tilt a bookshelf speaker or swap out a driver once it's plastered into the wall. That's why the engineering behind the KEF model matters. KEF's 12th generation Uni-Q Driver array claims to place the tweeter and midwoofer in a single point, which, on paper, should give a more coherent soundstage even when the speakers are flush with the wall. The Metamaterial absorption technology is meant to tame reflections that normally ruin in-wall performance, and the Thanks Certified Ultra badge promises a level of measured accuracy that most home theater enthusiasts chase. I actually installed a pair in my own den, and the practical side of things showed up quickly. First, the mounting kit is surprisingly thorough. You get pre-drilled brackets, a sealing gasket, and clear step-by-step instructions. That matters because a common hidden trade-off with in-wall speakers is the time you spend hunting for the right cutout size and dealing with acoustic sealant. KEF's design uses a recessed lip on the speaker frame, so once the cutout is made, the unit sits a few millimeters back from the wall surface. In my test room, that helped keep the front-firing drivers from directly hitting drywall, which reduced that boomy feeling you often hear with cheaper models. Sound-wise, the dual 6.5-inch aluminium bass drivers give a low end that's noticeably tighter than the flimsy 4-inch cones you find in budget builds. I ran a mix of dialogue-heavy shows, orchestral movies, and a few bass-driven video games. In a scene where a submarine rumbles beneath the deck, the KEF speakers reproduced that low rumble without overwhelming the rest of the mix. The bass stayed controlled, and the mids stayed clear enough to hear a whispered line. The Uni-Q array really shines when you move the listening position a few feet off axis. The soundstage stays anchored, and you don't get the hole in the middle effect that some in-wall speakers produce. That's practical evidence that the engineering isn't just marketing fluff. But no product is flawless, and there are a couple of practical weaknesses worth flagging. The first is the price point. You're paying for premium materials, the Thanks certification, and the research behind the Metamaterial panel. If you're only looking to boost a single TV room with modest expectations, you might find a high-quality bookshelf speaker mounted on a discrete wall bracket a more economical route. Second, the installation does require a clean cut in the wall, which means you need to be comfortable with a drywall saw or hiring a pro. In older homes with plaster or brick, the fit can become a bit of a nightmare, and you may need to add extra framing to accommodate the speaker's depth. That's a hidden cost that can surprise first-time buyers. So who should actually consider the KEF Ci3160RLM THX? If you're a home theater enthusiast who wants an invisible speaker that doesn't sacrifice the cinematic experience, someone who values a calibrated soundstage and can afford to invest in a proper wall cut, this is a solid choice. It also makes sense for audiophiles building a high-end surround system who already own a THX-certified receiver and want the speakers to match that level of performance. On the other hand, if you're on a tighter budget, live in a rental where you can't make permanent cuts, or you simply don't mind the speakers being visible, you might skip this model and look at surface mount options or even a higher-end floor-standing pair. Overall, the value in the KEF Ci3160RLM THX comes from what you get after the installation, not just the headline specs. The Metamaterial panel does a quiet job of keeping reflections at bay. The dual aluminium bass drivers give you a low end that stays musical rather than rattling, and the Uni-Q array keeps the sound coherent across the room. Those are the things that matter when you're actually watching a film or listening to a soundtrack for hours on end. If you're willing to put in the effort to get the cutout right and can budget for the price, you'll likely end up with a speaker that feels like a smarter buy than the cheap alternatives that leave you reaching for.